Welcome to Short Movie Channel. The movie starts inside an orphanage. Two masked men break in and steal the orphanage's records. One of the staff tries to figure out what's going on, but one of the intruders strangles her. Then we cut to Eric and Melanie, a couple who have been in love for 3 years and have finally decided to get married. Because Eric loves Melanie so much, he chooses her birthday as their wedding day. He plans a surprise for her at his mansion, inviting their families and friends. Melanie is surprised when Eric presents her with an expensive engagement ring. Eric works as a designer at a major advertising company, while Melanie owns a furniture showroom. Her close friend Alyssa is the showroom's manager. At the party, they talk about an important meeting scheduled for the next day with a big investor. The following morning, Melanie and Alyssa meet the investor. His name is Raymond, as he arrives at the showroom. Alyssa is immediately attracted to him. Raymond offers Melanie a business deal and tells her to send him her address. He says he'll come to her house the next morning to finalize the deal. After the meeting, Melanie excitedly tells Eric about Raymond and the business deal. She also mentions how Alyssa was smitten the moment she saw him. Later, the doorbell rings. It's Raymond. They introduce themselves, and before any business talk, Raymond asks to use the bathroom. The next morning, Eric is preparing breakfast. He and Melanie have a tradition where they take turns making breakfast. He finishes cooking and heads to his car, but when he gets in, he's shocked to find someone waiting in the back seat. The man knocks Eric out and kidnaps him. Eric wakes up to find himself chained to a bed in a dark basement. He can't see who the person is because of the shadows. The man starts talking to Eric, revealing that he knows every detail about his life and work. Eric yells, hoping someone will hear him and help, but the man tells him they're in a soundproof and isolated place, so no one can hear him. The man demands Eric tell him everything about his life, especially anything important from the past 20 years. He says if Eric cooperates, he might let him live. Eric asks, "Why are you doing this?" The man answers, "Because I'm going to take your life and become you." Suddenly, the man steps into the light, and Eric is stunned. He's looking at an exact copy of himself. The man is his identical twin brother, Michael. Michael shows Eric a screen with 4 surveillance cameras monitoring Eric's mansion, even his bedroom. Eric tries to offer him money to let him go, but Michael refuses, saying, "I'm going to take your life, your wife, and the money too, because I am Eric now." Michael assumes Eric's identity. First, he calls Melanie and tells her he's flying to Chicago for an important business conference. She asks when he's leaving, and he tells her he's going to stop by the house first to grab some clothes and essentials, then head to the airport. Meanwhile, Eric is helpless, forced to listen to everything and unable to speak. Eric warns Michael, saying Melanie will eventually realize the truth because she's known him for so long. Michael threatens him, saying, "For your sake, and hers, you better hope she doesn't." Michael demands Eric hand over all his bank account passwords. That night, Melanie hears a noise in the house. Worried, she grabs a vase for protection and searches the house, thinking there might be an intruder, but she finds no one. Michael calls her to check in. He's changed his hairstyle to match Eric's perfectly. This is a test to see if Melanie notices any difference. She does sense something odd in his voice and way of speaking. Michael brushes it off, saying he's just trying to change how he talks. Later, someone knocks at the door. Michael answers. A man tells him the house was under mortgage for 6 months, and he's not supposed to be there. Michael tries to get rid of him, but the man refuses to leave until Michael leaves. Realizing the man is a threat, Michael goes inside, gets a gun with a silencer, and shoots him in the head, killing him instantly. The next day, Melanie is at home when Michael walks in. Of course, she thinks it's Eric, so she runs to him, hugs him, and says she missed him. She takes him to their room. At the same time, Eric is watching everything through the security screens. He sees Michael with his wife but can't do anything to stop it. Melanie notices a scratch on Michael's back and asks him about it. He tells her it's just a small scratch he got while helping an elderly woman carry her bags off the plane. Melanie's surprised and says, "Since when are you so chivalrous?" but she lets it go. The next morning, Melanie wakes up and calls Alyssa. She tells her that after years of knowing Eric, he's acting different, like he's changed. Then she heads to the kitchen and notices something's off. The breakfast Eric usually makes isn't there. She starts to suspect Michael because Eric never mentioned anything about skipping breakfast, likely on purpose, so Melanie would grow suspicious. Michael heads out pretending to be Eric and meets up with his colleague, Dillo, who reminds him about their golf game that night. Meanwhile, Melanie is at the gallery talking to Alyssa, telling her she feels like Eric isn't himself anymore. She even says he forgot to make breakfast, which has never happened since they got married. At that moment, flowers from Michael arrive for Melanie. That raises even more suspicion because Eric isn't the type to send flowers. She tells Alyssa she's convinced he's hiding something, and maybe he wasn't even on a trip at all, maybe he cheated on her or did something wrong. Raymond, the investor, arrives and Melanie uses the moment to get him to sign some contracts. There's a mutual attraction between Raymond and Alyssa too. While this is happening, Melanie notices Michael watching her from outside the window. But when she runs out, no one's there. Later, Dillo shows up at Eric's house, ringing the doorbell. Michael answers and says he's been waiting so they can go play golf. Meanwhile, Melanie and Alyssa are at a bar, and they decide to have dinner with Raymond that Friday at Eric's mansion. Michael, caught in this whole golf lie, calls someone to ask Eric about which clubs he used to go to. Just then, Dillo arrives with his golf gear and overhears Michael on the phone. Dillo looks at him closely and senses he's nervous and off. Michael says the golf stuff is, as usual, in the shed out back. When Dillo turns around, Michael grabs a golf club and hits him over the head, knocking him out. Michael quickly hides all the golf stuff. Melanie pulls into the driveway, so he rushes to drag Dillo's body outside and shoves him into the trunk. Melanie enters the house, calling out for Eric, but doesn't find him. Suddenly, Michael appears and tells her he was out playing golf with Dillo. Melanie looks at him confused and says, "But your car is still in the driveway." He brushes it off, telling her to go rest because he has a few things to take care of. He also asks her to meet him at the pool at 7 p.m. At 7 o'clock, Melanie goes to the pool and finds a romantic setup with champagne. She smiles but tells him he doesn't need to do all this just to prove he loves her. Then she notices a pocket square in his jacket and asks, "Since when do you wear a pocket square?" Michael ignores the question and says, "Let's just celebrate a new beginning and live in the moment. Forget the past." Melanie looks puzzled and says, "You don't love our past?" He says, "Of course I do." She then reminds him that Alyssa and her boyfriend Raymond will be coming for dinner Friday night. Michael pauses, so Melanie prompts him again, and he pretends to suddenly remember. During the dinner, Michael sits at the table with them. Alyssa nudges Melanie to tell Raymond how she and Eric met. Melanie says, "Michael tells the story better than I do." Michael looks nervous, trying to dodge the question, but everyone encourages him to tell it. He glances at the hidden camera he set up near the dining table, knowing Eric is watching. Michael begins the story. "It was about 3 years ago." But Melanie corrects him. 3.5 years, actually. He continues, saying he used to design websites before switching careers. Raymond asks what he does now, and Michael says, "I'm a tech designer at a company called Access Media." Raymond says, "Oh, that's a good company. I worked with them before." Michael starts bragging about the websites he created, but Melanie chimes in saying he's too modest. She explains how Eric developed algorithms that made their sites top search engine results. She asks him to tell them more about that. Michael turns red and doesn't know what to say. He dodges the question by putting his hand on Melanie's and says, "I fell in love with Melanie before I even met her." She awkwardly pulls her hand away and gets up to offer drinks. In the kitchen, Michael follows her to help. She asks him to get her the small bag. Michael starts looking around the kitchen, confused, clearly not knowing what she's talking about. Melanie watches him closely. Just then, Raymond and Alyssa call out, saying they're leaving. Meanwhile, Eric, still locked away, stretches his leg and pulls over a pizza box with a receipt clipped to it. He grabs the clip and tries to use it to unlock the handcuffs. Later that night, after the guests leave, Melanie asks Michael why he hesitated when telling the story of how they met. He avoids answering, saying he'll be ready to tell the full story to anyone who asks in the future. Melanie tries to trap him and says, "Will you also tell our maid?" Michael looks confused, and she changes her expression and says coldly, "We don't have a maid." She walks off and goes to bed. Michael heads to the place where Eric is being held. He unlocks the door and steps inside, but Eric jumps him. Michael pulls a gun and orders him back into the room. Eric asks how he knew he had unlocked the cuffs. Michael points to the camera watching him. Michael locks him back up and puts the handcuffs on again. Michael then heads to work, meets with his boss, and finds out there's a task he's late on and must complete quickly because it's urgent. That night, Melanie tries to open Eric's laptop, but she doesn't get the chance because she hears a noise outside the house. She gets scared and calls the police. An officer shows up and checks the place but doesn't find any sign that someone broke in. Still, he tells her he'll file a report and assign a patrol officer to watch the house 24/7. He then asks her about her husband, and she says she sent him a message and expects him to be on his way. At that time, Michael goes to Eric and gives him the laptop, telling him he must finish the work. He threatens to kill Melanie if he doesn't. So, Eric is forced to agree. Meanwhile, Melanie calls the company where Dalo works, the same Dalo who had given Eric the job, and asks if Eric is there. Dalo's wife tells her he's been missing for 2 days. The next day, Melanie sits with her friend Alyssa and tells her that Eric's behavior has been really strange lately. She asks her to keep an eye on him. At the shelter, one of the workers is shocked by something growing in the plants, and he runs off to report it. At the same time, Alyssa starts following Michael. She sneaks behind a cafe and hears him talking on the phone with someone. Michael says the police found the body. Michael freaks out, asking how they found it. Alyssa overhears the word body and is shocked. Michael walks away, and Alyssa immediately calls Melanie, leaves her a voice message, and tells her what she just heard. Then, Alyssa heads to her car, but Michael appears, holding a gun. He threatens her and forces her into the car. He drives her to the place where Eric is being held. There, Alyssa sees Eric and realizes he has a twin brother. Michael ties her to a chair and drops chains from the ceiling. He tells her they were meant for Melanie. Then, Michael leaves them there. Back at home, Melanie listens to her voicemail and is terrified. She rushes to Eric's office and starts searching for anything that might lead her to the truth. At the same time, Eric tells Alyssa that he did have a twin brother, but their parents died in a car crash when they were 3. They both grew up in an orphanage. While Melanie searches the office, she finds a file that confirms everything Eric said. After discovering the truth, Melanie starts acting cautiously around Michael. She tries calling Alyssa to check on her, but her phone is off. Melanie and Raymond go to her house but don't find her. Melanie tells Raymond that her husband has a twin brother, and that she feels like something's off. They head to the cafe where Alyssa had been watching Michael and find her car parked outside. Melanie calls the police, but they say 24 hours must pass before filing a missing persons report. Meanwhile, Michael is seen talking to Eric and Alyssa. He reveals how much he resents Eric and has always wanted to be in his place. A family had adopted Eric when they were young, and he lived a happy life. But Michael stayed in the orphanage and grew up there. Eric never once looked for his brother. That night, Michael visits Melanie and senses that she's nervous and acting differently, like she knows the truth. Melanie hides her suspicion, but suddenly notices the bandage on his arm is gone, revealing a tattoo in the same spot where he said he had a wound. That tattoo proves he was in prison. She realizes this man isn't her husband, since her real husband never had that tattoo. Then Michael gets a phone call from Raymond, and we find out Raymond has been working with Michael the whole time, helping him with everything. Raymond warns Michael that Melanie is hesitating to sign the documents, and it looks like she's catching on to their plan to steal her money. He tells him Melanie has shared everything about the past, including the fact that Eric had a twin. Melanie sneaks out to Eric's car and plants a GPS tracker to find out where he's been hiding, as she's sure he's involved in Alyssa's disappearance. The next morning, the tracker pinpoints the location where Michael is keeping Eric. Melanie grabs her car and heads there, but is surprised to find Raymond standing outside the car. She tells him she's found Alyssa's location and also mentions the tattoo on Michael's shoulder proves he was in prison, and that he's not her husband because her real husband didn't have that tattoo. They go to the location tracked by the GPS. Raymond arrives first and calls Michael, who also shows up. Meanwhile, Melanie calls the police to report the address. She gets out of the car and walks inside with confidence. Raymond waits behind the door with a knife, getting ready to kill her, but Michael shoots Raymond and kills him. Michael then goes into the basement where Eric and Alyssa are held. Eric tries to bribe Michael with money to let them go, sensing Michael might really kill them. But Michael tells him he no longer cares about money. His goal now is to make Melanie fall in love with him. Melanie then steps up to Michael and starts sweet-talking him, pretending to care. He begins to lower his guard and puts the gun down. Suddenly, Melanie stabs him in the stomach with a knife. At that moment, the police arrive and arrest Michael. Later, Melanie finds out she's pregnant, with twins. Eric surprises her by gathering all their friends and loved ones to celebrate the news. And that's how the movie ends. If you liked the film, give us a like, leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.